back with that and that and that and hello, hello, hello. How are you all doing? I'm not very happy. I'm just happen to be very, very caffeinated. So, did I show you guys this one? I think I did. I'm not 100% certain, but I think I did. Um, However, I don't think I fixed this one properly. It's fine. That one's fine. This right here. Hello, hello, hello. And, we'll go ahead and I'll start editing it just to make sure everything's fine. But, yeah, okay. Welcome back. The game to the game called Ages of you know what? I just remembered something. Because there's technically like 12 kingdoms on here, but only three of them are really, three or four of them are really geopolitically on scale. Because 12 kingdoms, but like six of them are city-states, if you will. So, really not, there we go. This is just a cutoff, because I've realized that the Kadush fights have been very influential in the island area, and lore-wise slash historically speaking, they were very influential. But I don't like the idea of even like the Kraelites really getting too much influence on these islands. So I just want, even if it just means that there's more competition too, because there was a lot of competition. These islands, remember, were not very united. Even islands like this had at least two kingdoms. That's why I have two here. I'll just fix these all. Welcome to the world called Fekal, but this game is called Conflict of Nations, of which I am choosing to use to portray it upon. Make this one a little bit bigger. Bam. Brush territories, there. And, yeah, in case you're wondering, okay, why is there so many flippin' nations out here in the water? Did they just, like, start there? Like, why are you worried about this? Well, most of these actually did not, like, settle through themselves. They actually settled through the help of all of these kingdoms around them. Nobody actually traveled this long path through here. Not for a very long time. It actually, the beginnings of this happening was around this time, but it was not during this time. There was a couple kingdoms on here, but the other kingdoms were all tributaries of the main kingdom, so. The kingdom of Sutki. This continent is also called Sutki. Last name. This half of this giant continent is called Wesne, because these mountains right here split it into two continents, Wesne and Natski. Sutki call themselves as Nains, because they referred to themselves as Nains once they got. I hope I didn't accidentally, let me, there. They called themselves as Nains after they ran into the Sutki kingdom, after traveling through the Tomal Kingdom and whatnot. The Sutki Kingdom decided to call the entire continent Sutki because in the beginning, I mean, yes, they traded with everyone around here, but Engzi really wanted weapons. These guys kind of just wanted slaves. Tomal had a lot of products, mainly fish from the sea over here. These were considered delicacies to everybody that's from the outside, but to them it was just, fish. But the Tomal Kingdom traded fish, and it wasn't like to the Esnaeans, the fish weren't that interesting. Like they were a delicacy, yes, but most Esnaeans were like, they're practical people, really. Very money efficient. They're like, yeah, it tastes good, it's a delicacy, but is it really worth my money though? Not really. I'll sell it to these other fools though. And you have so really what they went to was Sutki, because Sutki had many things. Many things. More of those fish, because this area right here has tropical fish that you can't really find in other parts of the world, except for, see, fish, because they migrate south and go up here. Um, they migrate. Boop, boop, boop. Okay. But they can't find them that often, and these guys over here don't fish that often, and it's not that they didn't know, it's that, that's where they would go for them, because they could find them around this island, and on this island, because they fished over here all the time, whereas the migration for breeding only happened during a certain set time. And also, this is where the babies and adults could be found. Whereas you wouldn't find any babies around here. You would find maybe some of the older adults, but really, like, it wasn't known for very high quality over here when the fishing happened over here. Also, you had other fishes that were much more preferable. But yeah, so they went here for many delicacies, a few different spices, and they said, you know what? Sutki, that's the name of the island. This whole continent, we travel through it really just to get to Sutki, so the whole continent is named Sutki. And when they were talking and trading with the Sutkins, they would refer to themselves as people from the east, because this is south. So they were like, this is east, this is the west, and these are the people in the north. Because everything was supposed to be tilted basically 45 degrees to the right. They figured out, their maps initially started off as a diamond, but they figured out, it's kind of easier to keep it as a square. Easier to fit it, easier to roll it up. So that's what they did. Yeah. Mushy, 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 mushy. Okay, what else? What else? What else? Do we really need to do anything else? It would be beneficial. Now I'm thinking. It would be beneficial to actually give these guys a few tributaries. It means they won't become as strong as they usually do, but for some weird reason, Kane and Bornu just doesn't tend to do a whole lot. We'll do three-ish. Maybe having those tributaries will fix. They're not as powerful as I'd like them to be, and not in the senses they never do anything, but in the senses they just kind of grow really big and then just wait to get destroyed, and I don't like that. These guys do enough. The Sutki colonizers, they usually last all the way till late game, which is nice. It's fun. It's cool. You got red stand here. Red stands to stop the growth of these guys from getting too much influence inland, and then perhaps unintentionally influencing and going to war against the Kithical Empire because they knew about the Kithical Empire, but really they didn't interact with them that much. Um, so yeah, because there was literally hundreds of tribes here. Uh, these tribes here participated in the Civil War. Well, not Civil War. It was like a Nejd versus what's it called? What was it? Nejd versus Shamar, I think it was, or at least that's what we call it, Shamar versus Nejd. Something similar to that happened with dozens and hundreds of tribes in the area of the Kithical Desert. So yeah, the Horde's really it. It really is a empire, but what happened is that the Horde sent an army looking across the mountains for better farmland. And if we look at the territory, this map mode here, the army they sent dwindled in number as they got further and further east. One of their main issues is that they started here instead of starting towards the border with their army. They all gathered here and then they traveled, which meant that by the time they actually got towards the mountains, the army had dwindled. Not super significantly, but starting off with around 100,000 soldiers and ending up only being 60,000 soldiers, which is still a lot, to be fair. The reason why they didn't go over here is because they don't have any like what's it called, semi-desert, tundra, like not tundra, savanna. They don't have any savanna over here. They do have tundra slash desert, which is what this is, and then this is a desert, and then this is tundra over here because it's really cold. Because mind you, this is like Canada, if you will, like Canada and Poland levels of how close to the North versus South Pole. And you have these guys that are like supposed to be twisted to a 45-degree angle. I can actually show you how that looks. Hold on, let me get the map into display here. Let me get a good display of it. Because I might be able to help y'all with this. Rather than trying to explain it, I might be able to do it on here. Hold on. I'm gonna do something weird. There we go. Can I? Where is it? Come on, let me do the thing. Can I not do the thing? Am I not allowed to do the thing? Oh, this isn't supposed to be that. Okay, there we go. Okay, yep, perfect, awesome, amazing, wonderful. I'll try to go ahead and grow it. This is how the world is supposed to be like. Probably a bit more like that. Accurate representation, lore accurate representation of the map. Oh, brother. Okay, I gotta like. I'm a screenshot and I'm gonna use that as the flipping thing. Yeah. Awesome. Amazing. Wonderful. Alright, let me fix it. I don't know how this is gonna look, but hopefully this is not too bad in post. Fix it. Bub.
Get out here! Get outside now! Outside!
So back to the map. So as you can see here, this is like deserts. It's cold over here. This one's like a desert. That's a huge desert. There's a desert here. It's really cold over here. Mountains. There's another game that actually does this better, but I don't think there's any support for the game. And there's a game that spawned more or less off of the other game that I'm talking about. I'd have to look into it, but yeah. The Kadoosh Fight Kingdom. Here. I could give them a puppet over here. That would probably be more efficient. And showing their influence around here. It's giving them puppets on these islands and such. But I feel like that might be making them too powerful. The Kadushites are not super powerful because of how much land is taken up by the mountains and the hills and the tundra, so much of their land is not worth anything, to be fairly honest. As you notice here, the Shinoan Dynasty, they have tons and tons of forest. Love it. This is rainforest. Supposed to be rainforest. Tons and tons of forest. More rainforest in Angzi. Tamal Kingdom. There were, you know what? That's probably why Tamal isn't that strong in this game, because I don't give them enough cities. There was major trading cities over here. All along through here. They're ancient cities too. Most of the ones along the river. Puppet map mode. Let's see. Esne Emperor. I'm not gonna name these guys because the island name's not too important. Let me see. Oh, I don't think I actually have that on camera, do I? The Well, I'll finish explaining the Kythical Empire because I realized I never finished that. So, the army marched across the mountains, and once they got across the mountains, there was only like 60,000 left. The 60,000, if you remember from the other older, the 500 start date, these were all, what's it called? There was a giant empire consisting of this northern part over here. Where is it? There we go. Okay. It's a giant empire consisting of all five of these guys here. The Hordes Villette is where the vassals of the empire were at. So these were like borderlands. They weren't very weren't very centralized. They rarely ever got messages from the emperor or whatever. Fekal was the region of not very good farmland, but it was a region that was mostly inhabited by what's the other thing? Like tribesmen and I mean this was all mostly tribesmen in the beginning, but very outlandish, kind of almost borderlands as well, but not a very lot of law. It's where the military people liked to retire. A lot of captains and stuff retired over here. There's only a few 100,000 in this, and for example, each of these kingdoms have. Is everything okay? Okay. Most of these kingdoms all have. Something's wrong. It's lagging and stuff. It is. Why is it lagging? Hold on. This game can be fairly intensive. It's what? What is this nonsense? Oh, I'll be right back. That should be better. I don't know why those things were running in the background. I'll worry about it later. Much better. But yeah, the Old Kingdom, the Middle Kingdom, and the New Kingdom, they were all part of the Empire, including Fekal. Fekal was where a lot of the military people retired. It's where a lot of mercenaries went. Um, Outlaws, bounty hunters. This was like the Wild West, if you will, without a lot of trouble, really. Where like all the outlaws and all the troublemakers who didn't want to cause any trouble, but also knew they couldn't go to any of the cities, kind of just rested. Also, what? Why aren't these cores? Okay. Why aren't like any of these cores? Was I silly and just didn't make a lot of these cores? What is wrong with me? What is wrong with me? The Old Kingdom, the naming. Okay, yes, I'll do that. So the whole existence of these and what happened was the Kithical army marched in to where the vassals were in the outerlands, the hinterlands. They marched in here, and if you look at the terrain, it's more tundra. It got cold, and according to the soldiers, it got cold and it never warmed up. They saw grass, which was something they weren't very used to, and they were like, "Is there an oasis nearby?" And they kept walking. There was like, "It's not getting any warmer. I'm not seeing any water." There was rivers and stuff. Something they weren't very used to. They're like, "What's with this weird oasis?" A lot of soldiers said, and they're like, "It's a river." And it's like, "What's a river?" And they're like, "I've only seen it when I traded these guys over here, but it's like an oasis, but it flows, but it moves." I'm like, what is this? They were pretty interested in it, so a lot of soldiers did want to stay. They faced very little resistance in subjugating the cities and the towns. But when they did face resistance, they just burned the city because the cities were fairly small, and that's just what they were kind of used to, just burning stuff. So the vassals freaked out because there's this huge army roaming about, causing havoc, subjugating the lands. Some vassals freaked out and they ran to the emperor. Other vassals started pledging loyalty to the generals, who were like, "All right, bet." The army, not seeing a lot of farmland or a lot of reasons to stay, dwindled down. Um, Also fighting the battles against the vassals. There was not a lot of people here. They could barely amass an army more than a few thousand men, and they were being taken out one by one. So they wasn't like they would raise 2,000 at a time. They could only raise a couple hundred, and then the couple hundred would be crushed, and then somebody else would see the army. They would raise their couple hundred. Nobody gathered together, and by the time they realized what was happening, it was too late. So some of them, when they did get together, they pledged their loyalty to the Horde, and the Horde was like, "All right, bet." And the other ones ran to the Emperor to try to retake their lands that they lost. Um, they eventually did find some land, but by the time they found good farmland, they said, "This is not worth it. This is not worth me marching hundreds of miles going through here for months, years even." And so a lot of them left, and the army dwindled down to only like 25,000. Mind you, this is an empire, so it's not like they don't have an army. They actually had a pretty good-sized army. So they went to fight the Villiers, and they did win the battle. The problem is, the emperor died. The emperor died in the battle. So when the emperor died in the battle, he had three sons. Well, more than three, but three important sons, if you will. And of these three sons, you had the oldest son, who was not chosen because he was the son of a concubine. But he was the oldest son, but he wasn't, like, technically the chosen son. So he was kind of a little bit miffed, but he wasn't super dramatic about it. That's not the one. Okay, this is one. Wasn't super dramatic about it. He didn't really have a lot of ambitions, but he did just think that he could claim the throne and that everybody would just agree with it. He was wrong. Um, you had the chosen son. That was the second son. And then you had the youngest son. He was like 5 at the beginning of this whole outcome. So, the chosen son, the rightful heir, ascended to the throne. Then you had the youngest son, who was taken by the, what's it called? The regent. No, he was taken by his mother. And what's the diplomat's name? Or chancellor, I think it was called. The chancellor, because he there was a plan to murder the youngest son, and most of the other sons, to be fairly honest. And they were taken to the northern part of the kingdom. These lands out here were known to be plentiful. There's plenty of rivers. I would almost. The only reason why I don't do it is because if you model rivers like this, it actually takes land away and really inhibits. Because you can. So, when you make water in this game, because all you can do is make water, you can then make it coastline or crossing. But when you make it crossing and coastline, what is this button? Interesting. Very interesting. Um, sorry. Oh yeah, but when you make it a crossing, they can gain money from it. If you make it water, they can't gain money from it. But you can make a crossing, and it can make gain money off of it. But it doesn't make as much money per tile as it would if it was plains. Also, it makes like as much as it would as a hills. So technically speaking, a lot of water is still more profitable than having desert, but it's not as defendable as a desert. And it's mostly swamps, rivers, and stuff towards the center of it here because the water flows out like this. And this basically top part is all an estuary, basically. It's like the land of estuaries. There's a bunch of estuaries over here. But there's a bunch of water here. So as there's a bunch of water here, but there's not a lot of land because, like I said, it's a lot of swamps. So people kind of just they have large cities, and there is pretty good sizable farms here, but there's not a lot of farms, but there's a lot of people here. It's a very popular place. A lot of trade happens over here. Um, well, used to happen through here. The Civil War that it broke out kind of changed things a little bit. You have these mountains here, as you might notice in the hills. This is where a lot of the iron and a lot of the metals come from for the empire, or used to come from for the whole empire. But they would be traded over here. In the beginning of the empire, they were traveled all the way to the Middle Kingdom, where the Middle Kingdom is now. Towards the later part of the empire, they traveled to the New Kingdom. So the New Kingdom was known to be very rich, a lot of people, not a lot of farmland, but very good, very rich farmland. The Middle Kingdom was known to have a lot of trade cities. This is where a lot of exotic goods would end up. So they used to get a few merchants from the Scythical Empire, but mostly a lot of the Esnean merchants, because the Esneans, this entire area is a nation of merchants. Very similar to think of like a corporate empire. That's basically what this was, like a giant corporate empire. Each of these islands specialized in something that they sold. One of them was very good at selling slaves, and in the very beginning of the empire, if you will. So I'll talk about them in a minute, but they were very good at selling slaves. They eventually turned to selling, what's it called? Bodyguards, if you will. It became very well known for becoming militaristic to protect their people from becoming enslaved, and then they became known for having very good bodyguards, so then they would sell themselves as bodyguards. Very cool, very cool, very cool. They still did sell slaves. That's what these guys became very well known for. Right here. They did sell other things, like food, ships, like shipbuilding, wood, various things they became very specialized in. And the people that didn't participate in the actual making of stuff would sell it. And they were responsible for taking it to the emperor, for taking tithes, and it just became eventually like a culture around selling stuff. A very large culture around selling stuff. So they would just go around selling things. And they realized that they could go to different continents and sell their stuff to get more stuff out of it because other people didn't make a lot of this stuff. They didn't have a lot of warriors that you could just buy like mercenaries. They had to rely upon their own people, and that was, you know, probably not the best investment, but you don't have to worry about them stabbing you in the back because you pay them more money. They're very known for being loyal once they were bought. Once they applied to the contract, that is. Once the contract ran up or was known for starting to get to its end, they were known for switching sides. But really, if you signed like a 5-year contract and a month, and after like 4 years and 9 months, and starting to get to near the end of the contract, and you're like, man, I don't really have enough money to pay you, probably not a smart thing to say in front of them. Just saying. You're like, oh, so you mean I have to go home now? Some of them were not fine with that, but yeah. Back to these guys, the Empire. So, obviously, the chosen child, he was crowned, but the regent didn't like the chosen child. So, the regent paired up with the eldest child because he thought he's the oldest child. He should be king or emperor. So, they ran towards the metal mines, hoping that they could stash up and store up enough weaponry, and a lot of their heavy guards went with them. So, the administration basically went with the Old Kingdom. A lot of the military, a lot of the higher ups, the generals, went with the Old Kingdom, and the Middle Kingdom ended up with a lot of the trade and a lot of the people, if you will, a lot of the cities, because there's not a lot of cities over here. This is forced for a reason. These were mainly used for materials, rather than actually being cities. They did have cities, a number of cities, but they weren't very large. So the New Kingdom maintained some power, some resemblance, because refugees, that's what they're called, refugees would run off to the New Kingdom, and a few to Fekal, but mainly to the New Kingdom because the New Kingdom had more farmable land. And the reason why they didn't have a lot of farmable land is because they were so heavy into trading, into getting all of the trade, that eventually food was known to be fairly cheap here, even though it wasn't a lot of it wasn't produced here. Food, grain like corn, was known to just be cheap here, so they could afford to have a lot of refugees, having a lot of labor people to then work on projects and build buildings. Fekal remained after during the Civil War. Also, the Horde, because most of the soldiers that did end up returning back home, because again they did lose the battle. They lost about 5,000 men, but 10,000 of the men decided to just stay here, and some of the soldiers did go back, and they did send soldiers to the vassals, but they didn't order them to attack. They only sent like another 10,000. They're really just to guard the land and stop anybody from trying to, take the new land that they just got. It wasn't really like they didn't see anything. There wasn't a lot of reports of, oh no, actually there's, farmland that you can farm here. Most of the people that did say that, because some of them did see the farmland. The battle happened around this area. They didn't see that there was a lot of farmland, but there was like, hey, there are green fields of which that we can farm. But the people who were with them were like, no, there's not. Like, yeah, there's green, there's grass, but it looks like a sick oasis, like an oasis that has been haunted by demons. And there's a lot of hills, and it's just kind of just cold there all the time. Like, you don't want to go there. I don't know what these guys are talking about. They're crazy. Don't listen to them. It's cold. Don't go there. So they didn't really send any men to attack anymore. They were like, yeah, we got beaten by this huge army of like 50,000 soldiers. So they sent soldiers back to garrison the land because they're like, we don't need a lot of men. We found these forts. They weren't the Kithical Empire, mind you. This is desert. They weren't what's it called? Completely oblivious to the idea of a castle, but they didn't have a lot of castles. And once they found out that there was like as many castles and forts over here as the entire empire had, they're like, "Oh, we can just send some men to defend the castles," because they knew what a castle was. They knew that a fort was very valuable, and that if you just had a wall, people immediately 1,000 men could defend against like 5,000 men. So they're like, you know what, bet send 10,000 over and just have them be in a bunch of forts. And then we'll wait for the army to come over and then just send us a message of the army, and then we'll send another army to attack the army. We'll like surround them, Except you had this whole like nobody knew that the emperor had died. It wasn't years. It was years later when they realized, oh, there's multiple kingdoms now and the empire died. We can do something if we wanted to. But the Kithical Empire, again, their idea is that, hey, there's not a lot of farmland over here, or the farmland to get there is very expensive to, fight for it. So they just didn't. They just didn't. Um, of course, the hordes, Villiettes, the vassals that pledged their loyalty, they knew the situation, so it wasn't very uncommon for them to be like, oh, send me 5,000 people and I'll go raid over here and expand the land a bit, and I'll get farmland or whatever. And of course, the emperor and the other vassals in the empire was like, I don't know. He's asking for like 10,000 soldiers. He's saying this crazy nonsense. Give him 2,000 men, we'll say, put a postage up asking for some volunteers for the empire, promise them some farmland, and then send them to this vassal. So the vassal would be fairly pleased. Sometimes they could come out with some new land, and sometimes it wouldn't. The army traveled through here. They kind of just went south, and then went north, and then went up through here, and then down here, because eventually they did talk to some of the locals, and they did get a bit of communication. And they were like, hey, if you go south, south is where the land is. South is where the farmland is. So they're like, okay, we'll go down here. And they did, again, find the farmland. They were met by some of the Fekal mercenaries and the old guard that were here. Very good at fighting, this culture is. Um, and they were beat around this area. Because Fekal is just all plains. This is all like flatlands over here. Except for these hills. This way, this is all like flatlands. There's not a lot of rippers here. But yeah, Emperor died. Things broke down. The new kingdom was set up by the queen mother, if you will, of the empire. And people fled to them for safety. The new kingdom was known for having not a very good army at all. The middle kingdom had the soldiers, these had the training grounds. The old kingdom had the equipment, if you will. A lot of the old guard, if you will. A lot of the administration. So the middle kingdom's efficiency went down pretty much significantly and immediately. But they still had the means, whereas the old kingdom had the people who knew how to create the means, who had some of the resources and all the know-how. Middle Kingdom had the resources without the know-how, and the New Kingdom had some resources, not all of them, some of them, with very little know-how. So, enough to defend themselves, enough men to throw at them. Like, the New Kingdom had, like, 15 million in it, like 10, 12 million. Like, it was enormous. With a huge levy army. But they didn't have any training grounds because most of the kingdoms that were subjugated up here weren't known to be very violent. So nobody was needed. No soldiers were really needed over here. So it was just levies. Whereas the Old Kingdom, in this area, these were known to be grizzled hill people and a lot of the old guard, and they had a lot of the armories and stuff like that. So you had typically heavily armored units that, if they wanted to fight the New Kingdom, they could punch tit for tat. You know, they didn't need a lot of men, so they did push pretty far into the New Kingdom quite a few times, but they could just grind, the New Kingdom could just grind them down to where the Old Kingdom realized, okay, we need to stop. Especially since the Old Kingdom was mostly focused on getting the Empire back, getting the throne back. So they mostly were focused on the Middle Kingdom. In Fekal, again, it became not necessarily lawless in the sense that there was chaos, but lawless in the sense of there was no real government entity that focused on Fekal. The Old Kingdom was not focused on getting Fekal because there's not a lot of farmlands here. And most of the people, most of what they could do was get mercenaries. But you didn't need to conquer Fekal to get mercenaries. You just needed to send a few messengers, put up a postage sign, and the mercenaries would come. Because again, a lot of these guys were retired, so people would know where to go. The Middle Kingdom could do the same. The Hordes Viliette could do the same. Now, the Hordes Viliette was a really mixed situation, because like I said, some of the vassals, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just play it here. We'll save the scenario. I don't care. Go ahead, play the scenario. Some of the vassals would go to the Kithical Empire, so it was kind of seen as a bad thing to do to support the Viliette and to take a job from the Viliette. But taking a job from any of the three kingdoms was seen as, not good. It wasn't encouraged, but it wasn't frowned upon by the rest of the society. As we can see here, I'm going to go ahead and go into the normal map mode here. Lots of different tribes here, so it would just be really hard to go and interact with the Kithical Empire for this news. They definitely did, because like I said, they were merchant people, so it's not like they were unable to. It's just not very common for them to try to do something like that. And not to make great efforts for a lot of influence. It would just be, traveling bands. Oh wow, these guys, nice. Something that I have normally realized is that the Kithicals don't do very well, like at all. Also, this is right after economy update. Interesting. Hopefully, I'm hoping that the economy means that once the Esne Emperor either wins or loses, that something like somebody can be fighting a war, but they won't lose as much gold, and they can actually gain gold while at war. That's what I'm hoping this update does. I haven't seen it quite yet, but we'll see. What I have noticed is that the Esne Emperor does usually win. Okay, so they are not. They either win very well or they immediately lose. Oh, new Lily just came out. North Creel's being an immense problem. I guess if I don't let them have as much control in the islands, they just go after Kadushi, which they're supposed to go after South Creel. I don't know why this has not happened, but okay. North Creel has just become the new empire. That's very interesting. All right, um, it's kind of interesting because in the hinterlands over here, that is kind of what happened once the civil war of these guys happened. What had happened already before was the split between South and North Korea. So these guys were already in a civil war. Already in a civil war. The reason for that is, I think I've spoken about this, but on camera. But this is religious kingdom people, if you will, North Korea or Korea in general. And what happened was the argument was whether or not people who were not Korealite could be saved. Like, whether or not they could be converted and whether or not their God would accept that. Um, the original teaching said yes. They eventually forgot once they became more of a nation than just a people. They kind of just forgot, and they decided to fight about it. I like this. I like this. The Civil War is still happening to this day. Even though North Korea, right there, the Civil War is still happening. That's hilarious. I like that. So, they fought about it. Most of the initial Civil War and the bloodiest part happened in the North, because that's where most of the people were in Creole, and the refugees kind of just started to flee to the South, and there wasn't much fighting happening in the South. Eventually, the people who argued no, they cannot, kind of won, if you will, and they were in the North, and then the people who were defeated were in the South, ran to the South, or the people who were defeated who believed, yes, other people could be saved, um, they got defeated. They ran to the south. North Korea assumed they had won, and basically their priests, their administration, started to try to not raise taxes. They started to make laws and do stuff in the south, and then that's when the southern people decided no, and they started fighting again and stopped following their laws. And it wasn't really the rebels who fought the war in the north that did this. This was just the people in the south who just decided to not follow the laws. So then when the north said, all right, if you don't, we're gonna send an army. There's already like forts and cities over here. They started to fortify. They started to throw garrisons. The people, the rebels, the veterans of the rebellion filled the garrisons. So they knew what to expect and they were ready. They were prepared. So North Korea fought basically, essentially, almost a second civil war, and the end of it was more or less a stalemate. Not a total stalemate. There's a lot of death, both times. The first, in both times, it was mainly North Korea who paid the price, but it was mainly a stalemate. You see that? That's cool. Let's see, minus 34, minus 26. West Craig, did they win against the Emperor? Oh, they're part of the alliance, and they actually. Alright, there's an Emperor. Winning quite a bit. Have a nation gain independence 3 times. My beautiful Angzi. My poor babies. I love Angzi. They are like a very aggressive city-state. Ancient city-state, just like Tomal Kingdom technically is. Their original cities down here somewhere. Long story short, there was an ancient city down here called Begiz. Begiz eventually had a war with Vegroy, and Vegroy versus Big E's was a very bloody war for back then. We're talking about back when the population of the humans, or the humanoids, I should say, here were only a few thousand, or a few 100,000. So these city-states with a couple 10,000, 20,000, and 30,000 were most of the humans, and them killing tens of thousands of each other was pretty expensive for civilization. Oh, that did not solve the problem at all. It probably just made the death of Kanem Bornu extremely quick. That's unfortunate. Are these guys still here? They are. Purple Height. The Esne Emperor seems to have lost all of their puppets, but they are still rather rich. Yeah, these guys have no money. Even though they're really good at fighting, they have no money, so... Yep. No money, they're starting to be pushed, and... boom. They might be able to piece out of it, they might just get crushed. Fortunately, the Esne Emperor is not really good at taking land, but it's fine. They might... yep, they pieced out of it yet again. Alright. They barely survived. The Esne Emperor, I think, lost land from that, but it should be fine. The Old Kingdom finally allying with the Middle Kingdom. Finally. Only took forever. It's really just a brothers' war, if you will. The Empire itself technically is still together. The Horde did send more than just 10,000 soldiers over there. They did eventually send another scouting party, if you will. Um, a good 50,000. They didn't learn from last time. In fact, they started even further from last time, so by the time they even got to the mountains to start to cross it, it was 40,000 soldiers. um, well, 43, but almost 40,000 soldiers. So by the time they actually went into the Vilayet, where their vassals were, it was only 30,000 soldiers. Now, they were joined by some of the people in the Vilayet, some of their vassals there. Um, of this region. It was only like 5,000 of them, but it was like 35,000 soldiers. And most of the Empire soldiers that they actually sent over there were, if you will, professional soldiers. They trained for it. Most of the people that they were joined by were levies. They were mostly peasants, with a few lords in there. Oh wow, I think the Civil War might restart. The Middle Kingdom might be able to reclaim the throne. What I usually do is I just watch to see which one wins, if you will, and then I just rename it into the Empire. If they ever get to, if they ever get to that point. They usually don't. Let's see, what's this? Oh, okay, cool, dope. Statistic, oh, it paused. Alliances. Yep, the Imperium, still very large, perhaps even the biggest. I think the Emperor might be the biggest of them, question mark? 4,800, 6,400, 3,000, 4,000. Yep, still the biggest of them. I don't think they're the Operation the Middle Kingdom. Love that. Yeah. I don't think they're the richest. I like to make sure that the Emperor can always be rich. The Middle Kingdom is rich. You have the Wesnay colonizers. I do like them being really rich. These guys. Okay. For some reason, South Krail's really rich. Why is the Emperor not rich? He's 5,000. Oh, he's up top. He's right there. Why is he not gaining money? Oh yeah, that's right. Isn't it limited by it's limited by land or something? So that they can't just stock up on like 50,000 gold? And also kind of makes sure that they actually spend the money on something. I don't know how to feel about this. There's always somebody, one of these tribes over here, that grows to be really strong. I kind of know why. I don't really know why, but I think I kind of know why. One part of the reason is that after it unites and then explodes a couple times, this always happens a couple times. There's a superpower that emerges here, and they always tend to beat up the Kythical Empire and basically replace them. I kind of think it's something to do with the fact that it is plains. So this area that's not supposed to be super strong and influential is actually pretty profitable to hold a lot of. On top of the fact that there always ends up being like 50 cities here. So cities, if you didn't know, gain an extra like 1 gold a second. So each green tile is supposed to give you like 1 gold a second, but the hills tile is only supposed to give you like 0.5, and the desert tile is only supposed to give you like 0.3 a second. So having a city on a desert is actually really valuable, um, really important to do. And in the plains, it literally just doubles the value of that province. What? What is going on here? Oh, the Sonoans got destroyed. But yeah, that's interesting. So I feel like this region is just way too profitable in this game, and I don't want to make it tundra, because if I make it tundra, it will be worth nothing. And I feel like that would just do too much and hurt this too much. Also, because it turns into actually valuable plains around here. But also, it then makes it to where the Kythical Empire, it's like this area only has as much strength as the Kythical Empire. I don't like that. I don't like that. There's no difference between the two. The Middle Kingdom rename has re-earned its name for the Empire. The Empire did once have a name. Everybody forgot the name of the Empire. That's how bad the Civil War was, by the way. Everybody forgot the name of the Empire. Like, millions died in that Civil War. Millions. Oh my goodness, are they ever gonna stop? Are they at war with them? What's going on here? Oh, are the islands flipping combining together? I like the fact that when these islands like unite, they get just so powerful. They get just so powerful. Also, the the main problem with the islands, why they had so many kingdoms on it, is because what is that? Oh, okay, I see. I thought like this was like a 3 province kingdom. It's like what in the world's going on? But the problem with the islands is that like they were colonized by all these different cultures, and then a great, oh my goodness, what happened here? What happened here? Why is I mean, usually these guys get really large, like Nen. Um, usually these guys get big, but these guys don't usually get big. These guys usually stay very small. Oh, there goes the Tamal Kingdom. Yeah, they don't usually get. Just trying to think what could happen. The Tamal Kingdom just collapsed. When did Wesnay get over here? This is the Esnain's job. Oh, the Suitkian's job. Okay, the Emperor got pushed to its very last flippin' city. In case you didn't know in this game, if you lose all your cities, that's when the nation actually, like, dies. It's not when you, take all of the land, necessarily. So, technically speaking, you could only take 5% of the land, but still win the war by taking out the capital, if the capital was the last thing left. Oh my goodness, what happened? I just named them the Empire. I just named them the Empire. What happened here? That city was commonly the reason why I made that the Old Kingdom and why I gave that the core to the Old Kingdom is because that city was changed hands many times in the Civil War. Many times. That was the main city that the Old Kingdom kept on trying to basically fight and take. And you can see that they have no more cities, and the capital was taken out, and they died. I'm pretty sure it has to be green cities too. It can't just be any city. I'm pretty sure once they take it back, if it was a core beforehand, it becomes a core. Oh, they turned the capital back to the original capital. I love that. So the Esne Empire is having a bit of trouble with Purple Height. That's interesting. What? Oh, what's going on with your name? Did you just plant your name over here? That's your colony, by the way. I hope you remember that. Oh, these guys replaced the Esnean colonizers. Nice. The Hordes Viliet. They're no longer a Viliet. They're just a horde. Nice. Nice. Oh, oh, what happened here? The Kythical Empire about to become an empire again? Is there any actual empires on the map? Oh, the, I just now realized. Wow, that's why you're colonizing Suitki too. You've already colonized most of Wesnay. It's like a third of Wesnay, my dude. Chill out. Relax. You don't need everything. That's enough slices, okay? Oh, Purple Height keeps on picking a fight they probably can't win. Oh, actually, they might win this one. The Emperor's about to be broke. They might finally outspend the Emperor by about 100 coins. It's interesting. Usually, if they both become bankrupt, both parties will, yeah, immediately peace out, just like that. I was kind of hoping that these guys would continue to attack and these guys would peace out, but that did not happen, as a matter of fact. And these guys they have full money. They should have been giving money to the Esne Emperor. They're probably too busy trying to support Esne when the colonizers and trying to gain profits off of that. I don't know what these three mean. I used to. During war, gold is off based on land and combat efficiency. Okay, that's probably that number right there. Combat efficiency. Oh, that's how much gold they gain from their land, from their cities. Yo, and then trade. Yes, that's right. That's what it was. Land, cities, and trade. And then this is just land and combat efficiency, so you can't gain money from your cities. That's an interesting way to do it. Is like you just don't gain money. So it guarantees that large nations will go down, which I don't really like, but okay. That's alright. Trade also goes to 0. I don't really like. I don't hate it. But currently the only option in this mode is to disable the economy. Oh, I should have done that. Whatever. Winner takes all. Max alliance sizes. Puppets, land seizing, puppet revolts, core purchases, maximum gold. I kind of like that. Donations. Unifications. Allow raising. 33% chance to destroy an opponent's capital upon conquering. They will build a new city somewhere in their area. I see. So they'll still take the resources. I think they finally just cored that area rather than dealing with it. Considering this core land only had like 2 or 3 cities in it, that's pretty efficient. I like that there's a flippin' empire that always spawns from the islands. Like, they always unite the islands, more or less. I like that. Oh, something weird about the islands that I was talking about earlier but didn't finish is that control on the islands wasn't established by law, and it wasn't really established by culture like the Roman Empire was. It was established more along the lines of how far, like, your people could be. Like, where could you send your people at? That's where your kingdom was decided by. Because it started off more or less along the lines of gang warfare, if you will. Because once everything, like the plague hit, if you will, it was like plague, famine, and then just people went crazy. They went mad. They started fighting each other and killing each other for the tiniest of reasons. Anarchy happened. Like, there was hundreds of thousands of people on here, on these islands. Like, almost a million. And then everything went down, and, like, islands almost became completely uninhabited. There'd only be a few thousand people on the island. Which kind of meant they had inbreeding too, but that's a problem that comes later. Because it's not like they forgot how to build boats necessarily. They just stopped doing it for a little bit. To a high degree. So all that craziness happens. A bunch of people basically died. And then things started to calm down when you had gangs form up, basically, where, like, you know, this gang owned this part of the island, this gang owned this part of the island, and you stay over there. Eventually, people could huddle up together, where if my gang beat up this gang, we owned you. Like, we, like, that's just what happened. They would say, we own you now. And, eventually, as they got bigger, it just became more civilized, if you will. Like, it's self-organized in a way that things stopped being so violent and so vulgar and started to resemble a bit more of civilization. It took a few hundred years, but eventually it happened. Um, is this? I love this. Lore I love that. Lore accurate as everything. The island is only like 20 pixels. Well, way more than that. We'll do this one, like 1, 2, 3, 4 by 7, and they had 2 islands on it. Like, they couldn't agree with each other. South Korea is doing fairly well. Oh, they actually beat up the colonizers. That's interesting. South Korea is doing fairly well. North Korea never bullied them. I just now noticed that. You can, he did that in the update, the creator of the game. You can start them off at war, and I might do that from now on. Just start these two off at war. To make it to where North Korea, because this isn't the first time North Korea has had too much influence, both on the islands and in the imperial lands. Funny enough, the original banner of the empire started to become just a relic. Like people, like that's how bad it went. The original banner was taken to the Old Kingdom, and to basically distinguish themselves, they made a small change to it. And so that the New Kingdom then changed their banner a little bit so that they wouldn't be confused with the other two. And the other brother, because they took all the banners when they left, basically they made a banner off of their own like memory and off of their own insignia on the coin, off of an old coin. So the original banner, like the OG banner, like of what the Empire actually should have had, actually sits in some of the old retired generals' huts in Fekal. Because most of the houses and stuff didn't have banners over here. In most of the estates, because it was illegal to have a banner of an enemy nation, so they just eventually assumed that if it was the original banner hanging up, that you were an enemy and you were trying to, show your support of an enemy nation. They did not like that. Horde's affiliates doing fairly well for themselves. Gaining tons of money. Oh, what happened here? The colonizers have come back. How did this happen? Oh, South Korea is not having a good time. How long do we want to go on for? How much longer should I go on for? I think we'll go for an hour and 30 minutes. Because this is the last video on this, this isn't the first video. You'll notice that there's not, like, any sound on it. And then the first video is not of the same, time frame. The first video is of 582, if I remember their numbers correctly. 582. So as you can see here, this is like the third time this has happened. It's a giant nation of one of the tribal empires, and the Kithicals are now gone. Surprisingly, they've been replaced by the Hordes Villiet, which, technically died once. Oh, I like this! Oh, I love that! The Hordes Villiet, I don't even think I saw that. You can see that it's organized, active during these periods of time, and it seems like they've died not just once, but 3 times. I didn't know that. I thought they only died once. North Height has only existed during this time. Oh, wow. I can, well, you could say that, those nations are the true. Oh, wow, Angzi has never actually been conquered? What? Dope! I thought they usually always get conquered. I feel so sad for them. They always get conquered. Little Angzi. They're so cute. You have High Valley. I don't even know why they're named High Valley. There's no valleys over there. It's not the game's fault. They use a random name generator. Oh, the Esne Emperor. The Esne Emperor came back with a vengeance, and oh my goodness, you shall not turn against the Emperor. Wow, 6,000 gold. They could outbuy them. Angzi, the original city of Angzi, did fall twice. The first time the city was abandoned, for like 100 years because raiders attacked it. Desert raiders came in. We'll just do this. Desert raiders came in from the desert tribes, and they trashed the place. They didn't burn it down. Their purpose was not to burn it down. It was only a couple thousand desert raiders, and there was a battle for in the plains of the city of all the soldiers of the city. They lost the battle, and they didn't come back. Because they didn't come back, they thought they were abandoned. So they thought that the city was basically cursed in the sense of the men are no longer honest to the city. What actually happened was the desert raiders enslaved and killed basically all of them. The ones that lived from the battle weren't coming home, which was something that usually, you'd have some soldiers that were able to escape even if they ran or something. Um, but no, it was just a brutal attack. It was actually kind of brutal for both sides. They met with a relatively equal numbers, and they lost relatively equal numbers. At least 500 died at that battle. But you best to believe the raiders weren't gonna stop just because they lost a bunch of people. So they went to the city and left no chair unturned. It was pretty devastating for them. The people ran off into the forest, and there was already like forest tribesmen there. There was already a few other smaller towns and smaller cities that became more prominent in this area, who were supposed to be like protected by Angzi. Like this is where they're supposed to go for protection in case of the cities to be raided or whatever. That's where they just would travel to. Um, that's where they would sell their fish because that's where they're, you know, all along here, mostly along here, but also a few into here. And once Angzi fell, these guys became a bit more powerful, and it wasn't for another like 100 years that people decided to go back. And yeah, it did fall again after that. The original city, because they actually went back to the original city for the second time. The original city was then sacked and completely burned down and destroyed by basically the same people that were up here. They're called the Sinoan dynasty, but oh wow, South Korea, okay, nice. But I think it was like the Genopai dynasty. But the entire thing was destroyed during the arrival of the basically the Chinese in this universe. Small kingdom fighting for their independence. It's all owned by ANZ? Dope. Who has the most gold? I think it was the Wesleyan colonizers, and it's ended up being the Esne Emperor. Unlike how the Imperium has never actually technically fallen. It's pretty dope. Now the Emperor... Well, what is this? What's going on there? Oh, okay. So confused. The Emperor did kind of crack down on these islands. He didn't immediately outright own them, but he did start to become way more, I'm actually gonna do something here. There we go. I think it's gonna be okay. Because it doesn't change the economy that much. It's fine. Oh, wow. North High. What? 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 Oh. Well, the New Kingdom is back. The Wesleyan colonizers are actually the Sutki colonizers. Nah, they actually have... They're colonizing everything. Both Sutki and Wesleyan. It's pretty cool. Hylia doesn't want any part of it, but, you know. Lore accurate Wesleyan Emperor. I like Wesleyan Emperor. I like that. It's just gaining so much money. West Crag being very um having a lot of money is pretty cool too. Now the limiter was to stop smaller nations from becoming more or less unbeatable because they wouldn't go to war because they realized they couldn't really beat anybody, but they would always be earning money, so they would stock up like 5,000 gold and no one would touch them. So that's why he made a cap on gold to simulate the fact that a small nation would have a small amount of resources. Um, but yeah, I'm surprised Esne Emperor has not actually founded more cities. You can see that West Crag and what's it called? The Wesne colonizers, they have founded quite a few cities, I believe, on their island. And then the Snowing Dynasty has obviously founded probably a few cities into here. So I've just now noticed there's actually way less cities than what usually are over here. I think so many rebellions have happened over here that they just kind of started to burn them all down. It's pretty nice. I like how there's like no progress happening in here because there's just mountain forts. Is that their capital? Is this just an island that owns half of a continent? That's insane. This is like if Venice just owned half of Europe. Does Angzi not have any friends anymore? Oh, they do. They're just not as powerful. Soothcrail. What is going on with you? Oh my goodness. Oh, the Tamal Kingdom's back. Oh. Oh no. Goodbye. Oh wow. Okay, that's interesting. The rebellion immediately just happens again. It's the oldest kingdom. 454. You have the Hortzvilliet that technically also the oldest kingdom, but their incarnation has happened fairly recently. Is there anything that's not probably the original kingdom? No, this one originally existed. Because sometimes these are just legitimately recreations. This is... okay. They were just recently taken out. Or was that inactive? So were they only taken out for like a few months or something? That's interesting. Let's go ahead and speed this up. My computer can't really take it, but it'll be fine. Small Kingdom's back. Oh, they took out Hylia. Nice. Jeez Louise, as names are. What happened here? What happened to the giant nation that was over here? What? Oh, goodness gracious. I don't think they used the color black enough. Just dark colors. Nice. I think the only reason why black looks good here... wow. The only reason why it looks so good here is because all the other colors are so bright. Oh my goodness. It really shows you the difference between terrain. If you look at the terrain and how terrain affects the actual war zone. See, they didn't just immediately take everything over here, but they immediately rushed in here, and Raven was able to peace out without them pushing a little bit deeper into here and not taking all the hills over here. Wow, okay. How are they still existing? Didn't their capital just get burned down or something? Okay, they had a core over here. Pretty interesting. Yeah. I don't think it's that big of an issue having a cap. I think the cap should be raised. Or at least made to where like 'cause I think right now it's because the Esne Emperor should only have like an 8,000 cap. I think the Esne Emperor, something like this, should have like 20,000 cap. And that cities should raise the cap by like 100 or something. So that if it had 50 cities, the cities themselves could hold more money. That way it would make smaller nations less powerful while still keeping the larger nations really powerful without making it too overpowered. That way a giant nation like this, 71, probably even more cities in it, could be much more influential. As you can see, it has a ton of cities. A ton of cities. Oh my goodness. Oh, okay, yep, that makes sense. But there's a lot of rebellions because not a lot of them are cores. So they need to start coring them more. Whereas almost all of the Esnean Emperor stuff is cored. Almost, not all of it, but almost. Oh, I think it is all cored. Oh my goodness, there's so much happening. Oh, Black Leas has so many rebellions in it right now. Because it does not have enough. That's not trippy at all. That's not trippy at all. Because it's not having enough, it's not coring enough. Which I think it needs to be peace for or something. Something's wrong to where it's not coring. And it needs to start coring way more. The AI is not coring as much as it used to, and it really needs to core more. That's nice. I like that. I don't know how South Korea is still alive. They've fallen at least. Oh my goodness. Oh, that's something else. They've never fallen? That's insane. I like how they're continuing their empire kind of just off of pure brute force. Oh, did they conquer them? They did conquer them. It's been quite a few times since they actually gotten taken care of, too. These guys back? Yeah. I think the Wesleyan colonizers might lose their entire home island, which is interesting. Which is up here. Which they are barely anything up there now. High Valley's pretty large. Highly is back. Elflitron, I think it's pronounced. Elflit, yeah, Elflitron. That's a cute name, actually. Elflia, something like that. Elfla, Elflita. Oh no! How dare you? How dare you enslave my boys? It was all fine until 1908. 1908 was a terrible time for the 1900s. Have been terrible to the Angzi. uh, highly surprisingly, it's modern. Most of these had been good until like the modern times. Now we can see that there's only 4 of the original nations that have never been taken out. 2 of these have been vassalized or enslaved a couple of times. This is the only one that's like second generation, if you will. I usually like to break things down in generations. This is definitely third generation, these four right here. It's already been 100 years, so times 3 makes it go crazy fast. You probably can't hear it, maybe you can, but the fans are going crazy on this. This is a laptop, by the way. Part of me wants to make a bigger version of this world, but it should be fine. Because there is, believe it or not, a fifth one. It's like America, if you will. It's in the shape of a starfish. I've made it in a Civ 5, but I've yet to make it anywhere else. They don't discover America till the 1800s, though. There are people that were already there, but they don't discover it till the 1800s. Uh, Eng Z, my boy Eng Z. He's been struggling so much. How much troubles have they? Oh my! It's too terrible. The truth is too terrible. The truth is too terrible. My baby Eng Z. What have they done to you? You can see that this, like their history is like, oh yeah, they existed perfectly fine for 508 years, and then 1908 happened. It was all downhill. It was all downhill from there. Black Love was like, oh yeah, we were enslaved once, but then then we got our freedom, and we've just been wreaking havoc ever since then, getting payback on everything. The Hordes they had a good run. Where was it? Where was their good run at? I think you might be able to see it. Yeah, 1548. We had a good run for a few hundred years. It's like 300, 400, 300 years and some change. And after that, it is back down to just nothing. Nothing but pure pain, suffering. What's the areas like? Oh wow, okay. Highly. What? Highly also is like, yeah, everything was fine till those darn colonizers showed up. They ruined everything. We got our revenge though. We're getting our revenge. So who's been? Honestly, it looks like with time, it's better to be just stable than it is to just try to balloon out and conquer as much as you can. Because, yeah, these guys paid the price for trying to balloon out. Let's see the max area. Highly is bigger than everybody and ever, but Wisne colonizers are remembered to be very powerful. These guys have unironically popped out of nowhere and just made the third largest empire and refused to leave. Third largest empire the world has ever seen, and then just refused to leave. High Valley. Oh, it does exist. I was gonna say High Valley no longer exists. High Valley is now just like a city state. At some point, these empires get so large, even if there's a rebellion, if the rebellion starts with a war, they can just crush it like immediately. Yeah, there goes High Valley again. So what's the smallest actual empire? So yeah, that's why they're called the Empire, because they're the only one that actually gained a crown. Or they're the first one to gain a crown. Should make a version of this game, like in Civ or something. Not Civ, but what's it called? EU4. I could do it with the normal. My bad. see. Nope. Okay. oh wow. You think these two talk to each other? Actually, wait. Let's see. Are they allied? No. No, they are not. Do you think they talk to each other? Esne Emperor are they the only ones? No, no, they're not. You still have the Esne, the Wesnean colonizers. I like how the Esnean Emperor has like almost no rebellion. Almost all of their cities are cored. So the AI kind of used to be. They would like make themselves broke by rather than making new cities after a certain point, they would just because they would be eventually just conquering cities that weren't their cores. They would spend all of their money um coring the new cities, and it used to be really expensive because like the 10th city was 1,000 gold, and then after you get to 50 cities, it's like 25,000 gold. But it looks like the numbers have been curbed a little bit to where it's not as much money to core. It still seems to be fairly expensive to make a city though, or more expensive to make a city and less money to core a city because I don't see that many cities being made. Because like I said, usually there's 100 cities over here. This looks about normal. There's usually at least 20 more cities here. But to be fair, it's been a lot of rebellions, so I'm almost willing to bet that I'm gonna rename this one to the new empire. I'm almost willing to bet that the AI just knows that it's not worth it, so they just don't do it. Oh, oh wow. Well, I mean, honestly, they should be in charge because they are the bigger ones of the relationship. 20,000 versus the 12,000. Insert grooming joke here. Um, 5,000. Oh, they're broke. They're broke. Hylia has to put them on their back. Oh, well, you better hurry up. They're about to. They're about to. Oh, okay. Oh goodness. All right. Hylia, the protectors of. Oh, never mind. The friendship party broke down. The friendship party broke down. I was gonna say the protectors of Sutki, but no, no, they are not. They are no longer protectors of. Oh, Esne Emperor decided, you know what? We're not friends anymore. You're not following my rules. Also, you don't even own much of your island anymore. Oh, interesting. They have endless pools of money. These guys don't. So it makes sense that they do make a lot of money though. They both do make a ton of money. Should be making like 100 a second. Oh my goodness, they own everything now. They're broke again. They're always broke. Can't make no money. It's sad. It's sad, I tell you. It's sad. I like how these guys are just staying here. They've been able to just core everything around here, so we're like, they don't need to leave anymore. Go on, my son. I'm so sorry for all of your troubles. I gave you a good life. 500 years. 500 years. The Esne Emperor is just swimming in money. Who's the richest? What are the richest nations? I wonder. Let's look at the gold. Oh my goodness, it's not even a flippin' challenge. It's just the Emperor and these two that actually have money. Hylia is just struggling with money and rebellions. I bet this is the reason why they don't make new cities. They're just trying to hold on to what they got. Probably why they don't usually declare war anymore either. They're so close, yet so far. Oh. There's only 15 nations left. Honestly, none of these newer nations are doing anything, so... There. It just makes sense at this point. We have a huge Blackla, and, the Esne Emperor that's just being invaded, I guess. Yep, that's it. I love how the territory actually affects. As you can see, they just go like right along the strip. They just go near, but everything else around it is just so harsh. Oh, the Emperor no longer has money. That's a mistake. They were able to 7,800. They were able to vassalize them. That's crazy. Honestly. Oh, oh, they went to war with everybody. Eh, eh. They've they've literally flipping. There's only two. There's only two. Also, what I have noticed is that they do spawn more cities and they stop coring if you turn off rebellions. Like the AI just knows, so I might turn that back on real quick because it's down to 6, and I kind of want them to. Oh, that's interesting. Is it because of the color? It is. Interesting. Now, they do have just so much money and so much power that these rebellions aren't going to do anything, honestly. Is this them? Oh, that's cool. Nice. Now, I bet that just spawned a new series of rebellions. Yep, most certainly did. Spawned their rival. If this was early on into the campaign, that would be terrible. But I think I'm just going to end it here. So, with that, I say, if you like the video, please throw a like on the video. If you like content like this, go ahead check out the channel. If you like, and you want to learn more about the story, watch the other videos. If you don't hear anything for the first, like, 2 minutes of the video, chances are the, the sound wasn't on during that video, so go ahead, just click off of that. Unless you just want to watch and see how usually it behaves, go ahead. I think the last video that I made on this start date of 1400 happened fairly lore accurate to how I wanted it to, but there was just no sound. So what I'll say is, check out the other videos on the channel. If you like those videos, go go ahead and subscribe. Most importantly, try to have a nice day, and I hope to see you all next time. Goodbye.